Top story this evening, Blair in crisis. One minister and 6 ministerial aides quit the government over the Prime Minister's refusal to name a date for his departure from number 10.
Isn't it extraordinary that the Prime Minister of our country can't even urge his party to support his own position? Weak.
That was 10 long years ago. Now it's David Cameron's turn to gloat. He says the government's in meltdown and that Mr. Blair is a lame duck. We'll have the very latest developments live from Downing Street and around the country, including we'll see how today's events have gone down in Gordon Brown's seat of Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath. A very good evening. You're watching Sky News at 6 o'clock live from Westminster tonight on a very dramatic day in politics. A little over a year ago, Tony Blair led Labour to an historic third consecutive election victory. Tonight, his political future is in crisis after a minister and 6 ministerial aides resigned in protest at his refusal to name a date for his own resignation. The first to go was the Defence Minister, Tom Watson, one of a group of usually loyal MPs who'd previously demanded Mr. Blair stand down. He said, "Your leadership has been visionary and remarkable. The party and the nation owes you an incalculable debt." So it is with the greatest sadness that I have to say that I no longer believe that your remaining in office is in the interest of either the party or the country. Tony Blair responded with a statement that he'd been intending to dismiss the Defence Minister anyway. He went on to say his signing of a round-robin letter was disloyal, discourteous and wrong. But the call for the Prime Minister to step down strengthened as the afternoon progressed. MP Khalid Mahmood also resigned, his letter stating the party and the Labour government's work is more important than any individual. Then 4 other parliamentary private secretaries followed suit. Wayne David, Ian Lucas, Mark Tammy and David Wright, all signing the same letter. All of us rightly regard ourselves as loyal to the Labour Party and yourself over many years. We believe, however, that you have not ended the uncertainty over when you intend to leave office, and that's damaging the government and the party. This afternoon, Chris Mole added his name to those resigning from the government post, but tonight, former Home Secretary David Blunkett has said the dissident should back off. Sky's Mark White reports on Blair's tough day.
It's the scenario Tony Blair and his aides have long feared. Turmoil over his departure, dominating all other issues on the political agenda, and now taking on the air of a crisis. The resignations of a junior minister and 6 ministerial aides, adding to the sense the Prime Minister could soon find himself forced from office. Junior Defence Minister Tom Watson and Parliamentary Private Secretaries Wayne David, Khalid Mahmood, Ian Lucas, Mark Tammy, Chris Mole and David Wright said the Prime Minister had to go now for the good of the party and the country.
We share his view, like party members all over the country, that the best interests of the party and the country require an urgent change of leadership.
A fleeting glimpse of the Chancellor today. His apparent unwillingness to call for an end to the leadership turmoil can only fuel this growing crisis. In fact, all manner of senior figures, past and present, seem remarkably silent on the issue.
Mr Johnson, do we have a comment, please? How long would you like Tony Blair to stay?
Minister, 7 resignations now. Have you any words of support for the Prime Minister?
Mr Straw, can we have a word about the present situation?
Scavenging around in this way is not a very constructive use of time.
But do you think the government is in meltdown, Mr Clark?
The only words of support for the Prime Minister came earlier in the day, but that was before the resignations.
I would say to all of my colleagues, and in fact, everyone in the Labour Party who is a member, who cares about its future, look, we just won a historic third term. We've got a major job of work to do in government. In dealing with the challenges that Britain faces. This is not helpful to us. We should be focused absolutely on what we do in government. The Prime Minister's position, I think, has been made explicitly clear.
And there is an increasing fear among some within Labour that all the political jockeying for position is proving extremely damaging to the party's re-election prospects. A feeling that some have their finger firmly on the self-destruct button.
It doesn't matter how many people sign letters, it doesn't matter how aggravated people might be that Tony Blair is not departing immediately. In the end, what matters is how the British people see this government and our party.
The resignations come on the day the Sun newspaper printed what it claims is Mr Blair's departure date, with a leadership election beginning at the end of May. If the Sun newspaper is correct, then the Prime Minister will depart these gates for the last time on the 26th of July next year. But history shows us how events can so often conspire against the Prime Minister of the day, and it's perfectly feasible, some would say likely, that Tony Blair will be dragged kicking and screaming from here long before next July. The Prime Minister's political opponents are now beginning to smell blood.
What seems to be happening in the Labour Party is a complete meltdown, a complete fight between Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, and complete uncertainty about the leadership of our country.
Mr Blair should either step down or name a date when he's going to.
Well, so far Downing Street is doing little more than giving vague hints at the Prime Minister's departure date. As today's resignations show, that clearly isn't sufficient for some, and the pressure for a firm answer one way or the other will only grow. Mark White, Sky News, Westminster.
I'm joined now live from Birmingham by Labour's Chief Whip, Jackie Smith. Very good evening to you. Ms Smith, your party appears to be in some disarray this evening.
I don't think the last couple of days have been very good, but the fact that 17 colleagues called for the Prime Minister to go immediately, I don't think sums up the view of the vast majority of the parliamentary colleagues that I've been talking to. Yes, people have been concerned. They want to know how there'll be a stable and orderly transition. That's what they've called for. That's what the Prime Minister himself said he was committed to when he spoke to the Parliamentary Labour Party back in May. Expecting the Prime Minister to be bundled out of the back door in the next few days isn't stable and it isn't orderly, and I don't think it's what the vast majority of my colleagues or the party in the country want.
You seem to have got quite a number of people breaking ranks. Surely discipline's your job, isn't it?
Discipline's my job. Getting through the programme on which we were elected, which is what the vast majority of my colleagues are concerned about, is my job. That's why I'm saying that actually, as I've spoken to large numbers of my colleagues over the last few days, yes, of course people are worried. They want to know how this transition is going to happen, but they certainly don't want what the letter signed by the 17, some of whom resigned today, said, and that is that the Prime Minister goes immediately. As I've said, that's not stable and that's not orderly, and that's not the sort of transition I think that would be good for the Labour Party or would be good for the country.
Your job, I guess, is to make sure they literally toe the line. Now, are they towing the party line by stepping out of loyalty line with Tony Blair? Does it really suggest now that there is a growing body of opinion within the Labour Party that wants to say thank you and farewell to Tony Blair?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, 80 people have signed the letter that Karen Buck circulated that says, OK, we've had some clarification that the Prime Minister is intending to go within the next year. That we think that gives us the certainty that we need. Now let's get on with the job. And, that's my top priority. That's our top priority as a... Well, of course, people may want more clarification, but, this is a Prime Minister who announced before the last general election that he wasn't going to fight another general election in an unprecedented way. This week he's been clearer that he expects that to happen in the next year. In the end, frankly, you've got to trust the best Labour Prime Minister that we've ever had to make the right decision for the country and make the right decision for the Labour Party. And in the end, that's what I care the most about, that we carry on with the successes of this Labour government and that we deliver to the next leader a Labour Party that is united and fit to carry on doing that work.
That's all very well in theory, as you well know, but as the party's chief whip, you're going to have to try and get people out to back what the Prime Minister says, to back possible legislation that he may be leading on. Can you really get those people to follow him through thick and thin over the next year when they know he's about to go, and clearly for a lot of them, their heart isn't in it anymore?
Well, frankly, I'm quite looking forward to getting back to doing, what is the real business, which is, getting back to Parliament, getting out in the country, delivering our programme, getting through the legislation that we were elected on just 18 months ago. And actually, I think that's what all of us ought to be turning our attention to now, because that's what the British people elected us to do. Yes, they know there's going to be a change in leader. Many of my colleagues want that and have made clear they want that to be a stable and orderly transition. Bundling the most successful Labour Prime Minister that we've ever had out of the back door in the next few weeks isn't the way that we're going to achieve that. So let's lift our heads, let's look out, let's look to the constituents, my constituents who I've been with today. What they care about is what the government's delivering, and that we continue to do that with this Prime Minister and through a stable transition to the next Labour Prime Minister.
It sounds like you're quite looking forward to getting your whip out to sort out some of these malingerers and layabouts who you obviously see who've let down the leader by betraying his loyalty.
That's a gross characterisation of the PLP that I wouldn't make. When I took on the job, I said I wanted to do it on the basis of mutual respect. I think that means that we discuss things inside the party. We're robust in the way that we talk to each other. We don't go public with letters demanding the Prime Minister goes straight away, and we concentrate on the job that we were elected to do. But I'm surrounded, and I know from speaking to them over the last few days, by a bunch of serious-minded colleagues who want to get on with the job in hand. They don't think the sort of disarray we've seen over the last few days is the way to do that. They don't think that that's the way that when we get to our next leader, that we're going to, if you like, deliver that leader, both either a government or a party that can carry on doing that important work. And that's our top priority, keeping up the success of this Labour government.
Tell me, what's the next cabinet meeting going to be like, do you think?
Well, I expect, as they did before the recess, it'll be focusing on how we take forward the announcements we've made on pensions, how we tackle the challenges of security, how we deliver better public services, how we deliver on the energy review, how we ensure that our place in the world in delivering international development is secure. Those are the sorts of things we discuss at cabinet meetings. That's the job of this government, that's what we're elected for, and that's what I hope we'll get on with.
I know you're pulling my leg, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I mean, genuinely, I have spoken to a lot of colleagues. Of course there's concern about how we achieve that transition from this leader to the next leader. Lots of my colleagues say we want that to be stable and orderly. My point is, bundling out the Prime Minister immediately, as the letter that some of my colleagues unfortunately signed asked for, isn't the way that we do that. And I don't think it's what the majority of either my parliamentary colleagues, and I certainly don't think it's what the country wants to see.
And do you think Tony Blair made the right decision when he got into all this business about a countdown over his leadership, when he started talking 2 years ago about not serving the full term? Now it's got to this, which has certainly left the party in certain disarray tonight, even if you don't think it's disastrous.
Well, the Prime Minister was very honest when he said that. He made clear what his intentions were. Then he got on with doing the important job, which is governing the country. I think, therefore, because of that and because of the success, he has earned, as others have said, the right to make the right decision about how the transition works, in conjunction with cabinet colleagues, about how we ensure that transition, which will happens in a way that delivers a united Labour Party, but more importantly, continues the work that this government is undertaking.
Labour Chief Whip, Jackie Smith, thank you for joining us from Birmingham tonight.
Thank you.
Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but Tony Blair's supposed exit strategy might not feel that way now. When he said that he wouldn't stand for a fourth term, the PM thought that he would be the end of it all, but no such luck. Backbenchers and the media have been obsessing about the date of his departure ever since. Sky's Joey Jones has this report.
Do I want to go on and on and on? The answer to that is no. I wouldn't want to put myself forward a fourth election. I don't think the country would want me to.
So was this the moment Tony Blair signed his own death warrant? He later said himself it might have been a mistake, but even today there are those within the party who think he actually got it right.
It enabled us in the general election campaign to present this idea of him and Gordon Brown as a sort of co-leadership. I think that was crucial to some of our core voters. If he hadn't have said that he was not going to serve a fourth term, I think we'd have even more rifts now. I mean, imagine it. People would be saying, is he going to stand again? And I think we're lucky that we know, in a sense, what is going to happen, that he definitely isn't. And really, we're arguing about weeks and days now.
Some would say Tony Blair was damned if he said he'd go, damned if he didn't. The point was to try to avoid the fate of Margaret Thatcher, who infuriated big sections of her party when she said she'd go on and on.
Well, he stuck either way. He didn't want to repeat the mistakes of Margaret Thatcher going on and on and on, but as we are seeing now, the promise not to serve beyond a third term is unravelling before his and our eyes.
Was that predictable?
It was entirely predictable. The moment the general election was over, everybody would start to tick down the days off the calendar for him to go.
It was an announcement by the Prime Minister that he would be going, and the media picked up on that and have been pursuing that. We've obviously had the thrills and spills of the Tory leadership election. We've had the thrills and spills of the Liberal Democrat leadership election. You know, it's like everyone's waiting for the next one.
And what would that contest be like if, as The Sun predicts, Tony Blair resigns in May? Well, any potential candidate needs the support of 12.5% of all Labour MPs, currently 44 of them, before they can put themselves forward. The decision lies with an electoral college made up of three groups: Labour MPs, trade union members affiliated to the party and other Labour Party members. All up, around 1 million people will have a say in the leadership race. And the winner? Well, that's the easy bit. Any candidate getting a majority of votes would become leader and therefore Prime Minister. So that's the plan. Those are the mechanics of the orderly transition the people at the top of the Labour Party want to see. But frankly, the way events are spinning out of their control at the moment, who knows what might happen? Joey Jones, Sky News, Westminster.
So that's the process. Let's just take a look at the runners and riders for the next Labour leadership contest. Of course, Gordon Brown is seen as the Prime Minister in waiting. He's odds-on favourite at the moment at 1 to 5. Second favourite, the Education and Skills Secretary Alan Johnson. He has the backing of traditional Labour voters, and the bookies agree he's 8 to 1. The Home Secretary, John Reid's tough guy image makes him a stronger runner. The bookies have him at 7 to 1. But coming up on the outside, the man attracting the youth vote, Environment Secretary David Miliband. He's in his early 40s. That gives him a bit of an edge in the betting. He's 10 to 1. Only one person has officially announced his candidacy. He's the Labour backbencher John McDonnell. He's a long shot, though. He's odds 100 to 1 at the moment. Well, let's see who Sky's political editor Adam Bolton is putting his money on at the moment. But perhaps before we think about the future, I mean, just look at today, Adam, and it certainly could not be described as a good day for Tony Blair.
No, Tony Blair, I think, is in the most serious domestic political crisis he has ever been in. The reason is that throughout the day, really, this contest has escalated from being one about a timetable for Mr. Blair's departure to clearly some people, some new people, not the usual suspects, coming forward and basically saying they want Tony Blair out now in favour of Gordon Brown. That challenge has been thrown down. The people who resigned are probably not senior enough to force Mr. Blair out. However, as this crisis continues to simmer, it's possible to see how it could be escalated further, and really it's now an open secret that this tussle is underway between the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. The failure of Gordon Brown to come forward and say anything being widely pointed to, as is the fact that those people who are being most vociferous are those who want to see Gordon Brown taking over.
Adam, do you read more into what has been said today or what has not been said, and by whom it has not been said, if you get my meaning?
Well, it's unfortunate for Mr. Blair, but perhaps not a coincidence that some of his closest supporters in the Cabinet are not around at the moment, either on assignment abroad or on holiday. They include John Reid, Tessa Jowell and Lord Falconer. So very few senior Cabinet ministers speaking up for him today. Likewise, those who are identified as Brownites, people like Douglas Alexander or Des Brown, or indeed the Chancellor himself, again, they haven't been saying stop this madness now, as some of the more prominent backbenchers have been, and as indeed as Patricia Hewitt, the Health Secretary, has said. So, you know, This is now out in the open. It's not, if you like, the final battle. It hasn't escalated, quite gone nuclear yet, but it's certainly at a level of bloodshed underway, as we're seeing with people resigning. And the question is now how it's going to develop. We know there's going to be a leadership contest, but will it be, according to Mr. Blair's timetable, allowing him to celebrate his 10th anniversary as Prime Minister in office next May, or will, frankly, through this season and the party conference, he be bludgeoned out most likely before Christmas?
Thank you very much, Adam. Adam Bolton with the very latest from Downing Street. Just catch up with a couple of other major headlines in the news today. Anti-terror police have been given more time to question 3 people arrested in overnight raids on Friday. The raids were carried out by officers investigating an alleged network of terrorist recruiters, and they now have until Monday to question them. A further 9 people can be held until Friday. Well, let's get a bit more on that by joining our crime correspondent Martin Brunt, who's at Paddington Green Police Station. Bring us up to date, if you will, Martin.
Well, I have to say, Jeremy, all this is beginning to test my very poor mathematics, but what we're waiting for tonight is a decision on 5 suspects who've been held now for 28 days, and they were arrested a month ago as part of the alleged plot to blow up airliners leaving the UK. Of the 25 who were originally arrested, there are 5 left. Decision time is about 4 hours from now. The clock runs out around 10 o'clock tonight. The police have to decide whether they're going to charge any or all of those 5 men, or if they're not going to charge them, then they have to release them. And we could get an announcement any time between now and tonight.
Martin, thanks very much indeed. Martin Brunt at Paddington Green Police Station with the latest on those terrorist arrests. A British soldier has been killed and 5 others very seriously injured in a landmine explosion in Afghanistan. The MOD also says a 7th soldier received less serious injuries in the incident in northern Helmand province. The injured soldiers are being cared for at military medical facilities at Camp Bastion in Afghanistan. First pictures. The first pictures have been published of the Austrian teenager Natascha Kampusch since her release after 8 years in captivity. The 18-year-old has given an interview to Weekly News magazine. She's quoted as saying she dreamt of decapitating her kidnapper so she could escape her first TV interview. Her first TV interview due to be shown this evening. We're going to bring you that interview with Natascha Kampusch about 7:15 this evening, just getting that in at the moment. Now, the British schoolgirl Molly Campbell has been taken into the temporary protection of a Pakistani court. The 12-year-old disappeared from her mother's home in Scotland, saying that she wants to stay with her father in Pakistan. Her lawyer had claimed that she was under surveillance and felt intimidated since arriving there. Well, coming up in just a moment, we're going to have all the sport, including news of Andy Murray and his progress at the US Open.